Hello, my name is Rita Venable. Thank you for joining the Women for Change Indiana Listen, Connect, and Participate panel discussion. The Listen, Connect, and Participate series started in 2018 because of our discussions with other women. We want to continue to advocate for ourselves to ensure that the quality of life in Indiana for women and children is the best. In 2019, we petitioned the General Assembly to pass a sexual consent law. And because of your engagement and persistence, a sexual consent law was passed in the state of Indiana in 2022. We are so pleased that you are here to discuss civic engagement, which is the bedrock of our democracy. Again, we are so happy to have you join us. This is our first in-person meeting in 2 years. This is also a hybrid meeting, so we are also, we have a Zoom audience. Listen, Connect, and Participate brings together elected officials, civil servants, and people of both political parties for a conversation. I would like to thank our sponsors this evening, the Indiana Commission for Women and Brown Investments. I would also like to thank our partner program, our program partners, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women in Indianapolis chapter, and Hoosiers Organized, People Energized. There are a couple of housekeeping items. There are men's and women's bathrooms out to the left and a gender neutral bathroom to the right. There will be time for questions and answers at the end of the discussion. In-person attendees can raise their hands during that time. We will collect questions from the online attendees and submit those to the moderator. So I would like to introduce our moderator for this evening, Sujata, Barai, Chugh. Sujata is a senior counsel in the business law group of Corrie and Corrie LLP. She serves business and nonprofit clients. As an attorney and civic leader, she applies her multifaceted skills to the pressing issues facing her private and nonprofit clients, as well as community organizations and political leaders. Sujata has wide-range experience counseling domestic and international financial institutions, manufacturers, government agencies, and small and large nonprofit organizations. She represents clients in matters related to entity formation, corporate governance, board structure, reorganizations, state and federal regulatory compliance, tax exemptions, mergers and acquisitions, contract preparation and negotiations, and other transactional measures. She also has experience with the various legal and social service issues faced by immigrant women who are victims of domestic violence. In addition to her experience practicing law, Sujata has served in Kentucky Governor Stephen Brashear's Office of Health Policy and consulted on policy projects for Louisville Mayor Greg Fisher. Locally, Sujata regularly provides strategic advice to and fundraisers for Democrat political candidates with whom her values align. Sujata currently serves on the board of Hoosier Women Forward and the Asian Pacific American Bar Association, Indiana chapter. She also serves on the executive committee of the Better Indiana PAC, the membership committee of the Indiana State Bar Association, and on the diversity committee of the Orchard School. She was a founding board member of Women for Change and she and her family are actively involved in the Indian community in Indianapolis and volunteer regularly with the Hindu Temple of Central Indiana. Sujata hails originally from Munster, Indiana. She received her law degree from Harvard Law School in 2003. She attended the London School of Economics on a Fulbright scholarship, earning an MSc in Social Policy and Planning in 1999, and received her undergraduate degree, summa cum laude, at Princeton University, Woodrow Wilson's School of Public and International Affairs in 1989. Her endeavors over the years have taken her to Egypt, Turkey, Russia, South Africa, India, and the UK. And after living, working, and studying in various cities in the US and abroad, she is grateful to have a chance to make a difference for her home state of Indiana. So, thank you.
Thank you. I want to welcome everyone tonight. Thank you for being here on this rainy day, past the worst of it, and sharing part of your evening here with us. I'm really honored to be here with 4 amazing women. Just some of my favorite people are seated here in front of us, so it's a real treat for me. We're going to be talking tonight about the importance of civic engagement in Indiana with these 4 amazing women who have a diversity of experiences, a lot of things that overlap, but also very unique perspectives and experiences that they bring to the table. And I think the issue of civic engagement is critical for Indiana. We have, we know all of the stats on our low rates of participation and voter turnout, but for women and for Women for Change to be putting this event on and to focus the conversation around that with these women is especially important, right? What is the saying? If you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. And that's not what we want the state of women in Indiana to be. So I think civic engagement, particularly for women, by women, that engages women, is a central mission of Women for Change Indiana, certainly, and something that is of critical importance tonight. So our goal for tonight is certainly that we leave you with all the thoughts and feels, and we're going to be having a really thought-provoking conversation with everyone's ideas and perspectives. But I think it's really important to me, and I know these esteemed panelists, that we leave you, the audience, with actionable strategies, things that you can go home and do and know that you're making a difference in. And I know Women for Change will continue to follow up with advocacy and actionable strategies. That is what they do best. So don't think you're going to walk out tonight with just a lot of things to marinate on and stew in, but you will be able to take action in a way that's meaningful to you. So with that, I'm going to let each of the panelists introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about their backgrounds and so the most important things that they want to bring to this conversation based upon the really extensive experience that they have. Adrianne, would you start?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Adrianne Slash. Supposed to say who I am and what I do, I think, but
it's too long, Adrianne.
It's not long that. So I'll say that I consider myself a community resource. I was raised that way, so I do have a day job. I work in healthcare and talent management, doing internal workforce development. But in the evening, I pretty much lend my hands, my ears, my talents, wherever I possibly can to make things better. I have wonderful past opportunities in serving in some appointments, some current appointments. I've had an opportunity to run for office, and currently I'm spending time getting an opportunity to mentor younger future leaders, as well as serving with the Indiana Civil Rights Commission, among other boards and committees that I serve on. And it's a pleasure to bring more people into the world of civic engagement.
Hi, and I'm State Representative Robin Shackleford. I represent House District 98, which is over on the east side and the far east side of Indianapolis. I'm also the chair of the Indiana Black Legislative Caucus, and then I'm the ranking minority member on our Public Health Committee. So I've been in the legislature since 2012. While I'm there, I'm always trying to improve advocacy and making sure that everyone is involved in the process. So while I've been chair of IBLC, we've been trying to promote advocacy by having advocacy days and also having advocacy phone calls and make sure we're putting out policy information. So just happy to be here and happy to talk about civic engagement.
Good evening, my name is Corrie Meyer. I am an urban planner and landscape architect and have had the opportunity to run for office, as all of us do, really. But, you know, my work with urban planning and cities deals a lot with civic engagement and making a balance between opinions and what people want to see and hear, and then how to write policies around that. And really that is one avenue of civic engagement. And then I try to ruffle as many feathers as possible. You know, I figure if I'm not creating controversy, then I'm not doing something right. And it's not from the standpoint of creating an argument, it's just the standpoint of creating a provocative thought and forcing all of us to think about all of the options that we have in front of us. I'm so thankful that you've given me this opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Elise Shrock, and I would say where my civic engagement is kind of geared towards is the intersection of women's empowerment, immigrant empowerment, and faith. My day job is I serve as the Director of Communications at Christ Church Cathedral, which is an Episcopal parish that is located right in the center of downtown Indianapolis on Monument Circle, the oldest standing church building in the city. And we have a really unique space being on Monument Circle, being right in between City Hall and the State House. And so I definitely bring the experiences I've had when I served for a decade on staff at the Indiana Senate, and then a few years after that in the hallway as a lobbyist. I bring those perspectives with me so that I can advocate for more equitable and fair practices in our whole city, really that stem from just loving my neighbor as myself, as I feel I'm called. When it comes to women's empowerment, I serve as a founding board member of Hoosier Women Forward, which is the Democratic Women's Leadership Program. We are on our fourth class now of equipping women from all over Indiana with the tools and skills and networks to fill corner offices and boardrooms and elected positions across the state. And I also come from a Hispanic immigrant family, and I think that probably has shaped my identity the most. And that's why I've worked to advance legislation to help the Hispanic and Latino community. It's why I served for 4 years as the president of the Indiana Latino Democratic Caucus and continue to serve with them in a different leadership role now. And that's really also largely shaped how I show up to civic discourse and the populations that I'm hoping to bring along with me. And it's a pleasure to be with everyone.
Thank you. So I think you see why we are so lucky to be listening to these fabulous speakers tonight. So I'd like to start by throwing out a general question for any all of you to address. As I alluded to, the voter turnout rates as maybe kind of a proxy for civic engagement, civic education, possibly, are kind of abysmal. You know, let's not mince words here in Indiana. Much lower than we would ever want them to be. I think we're looking at voter turnout being at 21.8% in the 2020 primary. We know that primaries are a little bit different than general, but we aren't great in the general either. How can everyday Hoosiers increase overall voter participation? What are strategies to become more engaged as an advocate for greater voter participation beyond each of us just committing individually to vote? That's kind of part one. And part two, and Representative Shackleford, I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on this. What are the particular barriers that you think Indiana faces on this front? Everything from gerrymandering and, you know, uncompetitive elections. I guess I'm throwing my 2 cents in there, or suggesting one of the things that I see and think about a lot. But from the perspective of someone who is serving in office and who sees how a lot of the sausage is getting made, what can we talk about in Indiana that needs to change here, and where we might find models elsewhere to increase our voter turnout?
Well, I didn't know if you want to start with that second half, because mine
Sure.
are first. Okay, so barriers, of course, gerrymandering. People don't think that their voice is being heard. They don't think that even if we hear their voice, then their vote is going to count, or anything that they say is going to matter, because they think everything is pretty much set. Everything, the fight is already set, so it doesn't matter if they're going to get in the fight or not. So there's tons of barriers when it comes to being involved in what people see. Also, I think people don't realize their power. They don't realize how great a power that they have in their voice and in their vote, and especially in numbers. Because if we look at anything at the State House, is we look at numbers. If we look at how many emails come through, calls come through, we count everything that comes through, so it's all about the numbers. And those numbers can change a legislator's mind, no matter if they're in a rural area or an urban area. But I think for people to really understand it, they have to get involved and actually see their work and see how it be impacted. So actually see a bill that they get killed because of their advocacy, like 1184, because of the teachers coming out and everyone coming out with floods, the 70,000 emails that we didn't get, but we heard about, plus on top of all the other emails that we did get against that bill. So even with the challenges, I think there are some ways we can still overcome these barriers and challenges.
I have a couple of thoughts. I think that one of the things that does tend to awaken the electorate is having inspiring candidates. And I think that we've seen that over the years, having candidates that are actually in touch with the issues, in touch with the community, in touch with where the future on some of those issues is going. That tends to really ignite energy. Another piece for me is making sure that we are talking about issues that matter. I know in the near future, marijuana is going to be a huge issue for younger people and for people who have family members or others that have been incarcerated for things that are legal in other states. We sit here in the middle of other states that don't have legal marijuana, and that causes a lot of angst. Good word, maybe, I don't know. But that would be an inspiring or motivating issue on either side of that issue. And that's one of those things that really does ignite the electorate, is to say, this is an issue, I care about it, whether it's for or against, and that gets me to the polls. But it also is, there's another piece to that, which is getting to know your candidates or candidates that you align with. And so for a person like me, I know who the candidates are, and so I tend to talk about them a lot. Maybe that resonates with some. So if anyone who's watching or anyone who's here presently has a candidate that you're excited about, there are a lot of people that'll be on ballots this year. They might not have a whole lot of people in their corner, but if you like them, you can get other people to like them. And then next thing you know, you brought more people to the polls. And I think that that's really what it comes down to, is knowing your candidates, knowing the issues, and being inspired and motivated by them.
Great, you can particularly speak to that with your experience running for State House in the primary. Could you speak to us a little bit about what that primary process was like, and what were the challenges with voter engagement in the primary? And in general, as you were trying to connect with voters, the barriers you saw, the successes that you saw, what worked well?
Yeah, I think, follow up on what Adrianne was saying is, obviously knowing your candidates is absolutely the foundation. When you shift from knowledge to action, it exponentially changes voter turnout. For instance, I think the statistic is 12 times more likely to go and vote if you have had your door knocked on. And so if you're working with the candidate and volunteering to just spread their message, and you believe in them, and then you can speak about them as a person, individually to residents in your community or even outside of your community to make a difference because you believe in that person. When I ran for office, it was in a primary Senate race. And, you know, some of the challenges that I faced is federal, because I was running at a statewide office, is, you know, there's this federal dynamic of what's happening, and then there's the state and then local. And, you know, when you're knocking on the door, there's a lot of heated opinions on federal levels, and we need to be able to discern the difference between candidates that are at the state level, federal level, and your local level, and gerrymandering and being able to vote in the general election for whichever party you think is the best candidate to serve on your school board versus your town council, mayor, or your, you know, state representative. That just comes down to knowing your candidate and connecting with that.
Elise, I think what Corrie mentioned, a lot of the grassroots actions that it takes to have those multiple touch points with voters. And that's just not the candidate, that's the team, that's all of the grassroots advocacy, and that's something you have deep experience with. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, and I think that grassroots advocacy is can't just only be about candidates, right? Before you can vote, you have to register to vote. And in Indiana, we face barriers with voter registration that other states do not face. We have a cutoff period a month before where no one else can register if they haven't voted by that cutoff. Not the same in other states. Other states have same-day voter registration. So vote registration itself can be a barrier. And I think in the past, both parties have, you know, the type of voter registration that's done is done when you have a candidate that's asking, but voter registration should be done all year round, which is a great plug for, hey, everyone listening on Zoom land and in this audience today, if you have not checked your voter registration, and please do, even if you think you're registered, check your voter registration. You just never know. And we're getting to that deadline where you're going to need to make sure that you're ready to go for the primaries. We need to make voter registration available to folks in spaces of shared values. That's something that we do at HOPE. I'm a founding member of Hoosiers Organized People Energized HOPE. And you'll see these all over the state. And, you know, they're not always at the state house. They're at your local coffee shop. They are, you know, when there's record store day at Indie, CD, Vinyl, we're there registering people to vote. You know, we're here talking, you know, to people who have similar interests and might be willing to take a few of these for us and take them to your coffee shop. But those are the types of grassroots activities that, you know, aren't even necessarily related to a candidate, but we can be doing to make sure that everyone knows that they do have that power. Like Representative Shackleford said, people don't realize the power that they have. And it starts with that getting yourself ready to vote. And then continuing to engage and empower yourself to get to the polls and asking your family members and your community members and the people who you share a faith tradition with, if they're also ready to go. So I think voter registration is both a key to unlocking that power and a place where we see a lot of barriers here in our state, and we can do a lot.
So the audience is keeping track. I've heard already two really powerful, actionable strategies or tasks that we can take. Representative Shackleford, you talking about how constituents voicing their opinions really does matter. They're taken into account. They're noted by you and others. So calling, writing, and really engaging with your elected officials. And Elise, even just simple first step of checking your voter registration. If there's anything amiss, going ahead and registering. Are, you know, that's real low-hanging fruit. So we've all got to commit to doing those things. I'd like to talk a little bit about the engagement that each of you have in your own ways with organizations that are specifically designed and especially designed to get women civically engaged, right? So we have the Luger series, to train Republican women running for office, and Use Your Women Forward, which is much newer than the Luger series, but it is here now, to train Democrat women, but not just for political office, right? As Elise mentioned, to kind of be at the table, so we're not on the menu, and in the corner offices, and where decisions are being made and where important conversations are being had. So could you each tell us a little bit about why you chose to get involved with those organizations and training programs? Why those may be of interest to others, what they should look into and what they might hope to get out of it, because it is much broader than being a candidate for office. And how do you think those programs are impacting and improving, the state of women's civic engagement?
Go first. I had the opportunity to go through a Luger Series class. Luger Series, for those of you that aren't aware, is a leadership program for Republican women that teaches you and connects you to the political system. Whether you're thinking about running for office, or you want to help a candidate, or you just want to become more aware of your civic engagement. And it's a year-long class. You meet all day for 1 day a month. And each month you go through different categories. And it's a fantastic program to get connected and then to build camaraderie with like-minded individuals. Your peers, my mom always used to say, she still says it, you are who your friends are. And if you're isolating yourself with a group of people that has limited thinking, then you're really going to be sheltered in how you behave. But organizations like Women for Change and Luger Series and Use Your Women Forward, all of those organizations are about broadening your thought and improving the way that you engage individually. And for me, it really served as a foundation for my courage to be able to run for office. After I was done running for office, we had met so many amazing people that my team, was sitting down for coffee and was saying, what do we do with all of this? Like we gained all of this information and we don't want to stop. And so we ended up starting a PAC called Elect Republican Women. And it is all about getting women elected to office. Women in the state house on both sides is only 18% of, whereas, as an urban planner, I'm looking at demographics all the time. And we are 50% of the population, women are. And so there's no reason why we should not have greater representation at the state house than what we do today. But those types of programs get you connected with people where you can easily pick up the phone and ask for help and put you on a path to being more capable to be influenced.
I would say that very similar with Use Your Women Forward, which is the Democratic Women's Leadership Program. That network that's built, even with just 4 classes, seeing the ways that the women in those classes have become, elected officials, party leaders, have taken, large nonprofit jobs. It's been incredible, and we're doing exactly what we said we were going to do when we set out on this mission, which is really reassuring. And it shows that, these groups are, it's not just about the skills that we are offering to these groups of women, it is really about the network. I feel like our classes are so empowered by the other women in their class and the alumni that they meet and the women who we bring in to talk to them. And that's really the power of every woman being able to share their own personal story. All of us have a story. And Corrie used the word isolated, and I was literally writing down not feeling isolated. Being a woman who really grew up professionally in the state house, had its challenges. It is not necessarily a safe space for women. It is difficult to be there. It was not created for us with any of us in mind. There are still a lot of really poor actors when it comes to the way women are treated. At any level you look at it. And so it was difficult. And I found myself, you know, things would happen and you would kind of stew about it and then you move on. But then the more I started talking to other women, the more powerful I felt, because it didn't feel like it was just happening in my mind. I knew, you know, things that were said, or if I was talked over, or if my idea got floated and it was successful and I never got credit, that's something that happens. And I was able to stand up for myself because other women had shared those stories with me as well. So these leadership programs are great if you want to learn skills. They're great if you want to meet people who are other elected officials and other players in the parties. But what I think the biggest benefit is like you said, the camaraderie. And anytime I have a task that I take on or a project, I know that there are about 100 other women coming right behind me to support me, and that is a very powerful and empowering thing.
Well, I was just saying, I'm always glad to be asked to speak to the women for Hoosier Women Forward. I come to provide motivation and also to let them know that it is possible that you can be an elected official, whatever level it wants to be, local, state, federal, and we're there to support them. And I try to give them as much courage as possible, because being in the state house, being a woman in the state house is not an easy job, but it is an obtainable job, and it's a job that you can do. And it can be very intimidating. So as women are going through this process, and if they're considering, like, should I run? Should I lobby? Like, what part should I be involved in? Then it's good to speak to them and say, okay, what are your skills? What do you actually want to get out of this? Because I'm going to always motivate you to run, but everybody probably shouldn't run, because we definitely need more women in the whole process, in the political process. We need more policy analysts as women. We need more lobbyists as women. So if you feel like that you can't be that person out front, but you like to be the person in the back that's working on the policy research, where I started at, because I was always a behind the scenes person and I was a policy person. So my whole life was data driven during research, because that was where I felt comfortable. It took me wanting to voice my opinion about my community and feeling that I should be the one and be that voice to finally get the courage and say, okay, I'm going to run for office because I'm tired of seeing what I'm seeing and I can step up and do this. So groups like Hoosier Women Forward and the Lugar series, it helps these women and give them that encouragement to get through this process and actually run for office and to get in this field, because it's not easy, but we definitely need you.
I'll just speak from the complete nonpartisan other opportunities that exist in space. So not everyone's ready to become a candidate, but you might want to tiptoe yourself into the water just a little bit and see, how do I get involved in my city? How do I learn the city? How do I learn the issues? How do I serve on organizations that are working in different communities and those sorts of things? So I was trying to think of what richness I could add to this question. And so Women for Change has done a great job at getting people ready, or at least planting seeds over the years. But then if it's education, that's your issue. RISE is another organization that's starting to build people to go into the education space. Leadership in Indianapolis has quite a bit of civic engagement education. I would say that it's helped to help you to see what the city is doing, where the city is going, and what the issues could be. And then you also have things like Leadership United, United Way, where they're trying to help you be ready to be on a board or something like that. It's not as easy to jump into civic engagement if you don't necessarily think that you're ready, if you don't think that your voice is valuable, if you don't think that your space is good. I actually mentioned leadership in Indianapolis. But it's one of those things where it doesn't become obtainable to you until someone plants a seed and it grows. And then you say, okay, no, that's my torch. I can carry it. I'm the candidate. I need to go. And for folks who are new to our city or who are new to raising their voice, sometimes it just means that you need to know what the issues are so you can get fired up about it. And perhaps one of those other organizations might help you to get ready before you start thinking about what's next.
Say that Adrianne is just a stellar example of what it is well, you've done all the spaces, you've run for office, the local political parties, and like, really deep engagement with civic organizations and really, leading all the way into civic involvement. So there is absolutely that pathway where you can be like Adrianne, do it all and walk all the pathways. All of us can, but
Would not recommend.
yeah. And I'll say that for me, another avenue of engagement has been, if this is of interest to anyone, happy to be contacted offline about it, but I'm on the executive committee of the Better Indiana PAC, Political Action Committee. And, so we raise money for candidates and kind of actually focus on the suburbs of Indianapolis. And I really enjoy, right now, at least as Representative Shackleford said, kind of that behind the scenes role of a lot of strategy and helping candidates, working with candidates and being part of that team behind the scenes. That's been really meaningful and fun. So that's a way to do it. It's at the local level, but not quite with the local party. But I think you've heard several, specific organizations and specific ways to be involved, not just as someone who's running for office, but if you have any inkling of it, sounds like Representative Shackleford will push you along the way. And with that, I also want to make a plug for the Ready to Run program that Women for Change sponsors and helps put on every year. And I say every year, but with the pandemic, it's like dog years and long years. Every year-ish, that is a nonpartisan program that trains, at least gives sort of that first step information to women of both political parties or no political party on the nuts and bolts of what it takes to run for political office. Things like, what forms do I need to file? Like things that become like where you get tripped up, even if you have all the grand ambitions in the world. So you should also check out Ready to Run. I do want to touch on, as we're talking about, really actual politics, running for office or being involved with those who run for office. What, if we can give our audience members a sense of what it is like to engage with the political parties at the local level, at a very local level. I've certainly had now some experience with that through the Better Indiana PAC. Corrie, you mentioned there is all sorts of national level noise. And so also talk about how we break through that to talk about the issues that matter at a local level, which might be very different. And what is the experience like to get involved with your very local party, municipality, your county party, and how can people do that? And what is, how different is that experience?
Oh, can I start on this one, please? So I've worked at both the county party and state party. On the Republican side, one thing that I can say, help is always wanted at your party. I can tell you that. There's always, whether there's money or not, they're always hiring. Notice I said whether there's money or not, they're always hiring. So fresh out of college, one of the things that I realized was that I really enjoyed the grassroots side, getting to know people, connecting them to their candidate, and that was really great. Volunteers always needed. So if there's something that you are interested in, or maybe you want to get to know your party, there are party clubs that exist that are social clubs. Those are easy ways to tiptoe into those. And there's always going to be someone in that social club, social setting that can connect you to a person who can put you to work. So that's not going to be the hard part. The hard part is deciphering where it is you want to get involved, how involved you want to be, and if you want to start going the more serious route of actually holding a leadership space. Those are decisions that only you can make for yourself, because the party is going to always pull you in. They're always going to ask you to help. They're going to give you more work to do. And next thing you know, you will not have a free night or weekend, and your little fist will be just tired from knocking on all the doors all the time. So I do think that it is very easy to get involved with your local party. Do I think it is very easy to quickly climb into a leadership role at a local party? No. But do I think it's something that's possible? Yes. It just takes a lot of time. It takes, sometimes it takes mentorship, partnership, and training to even get to a place where you can be seen in that way, and that's where those programs come into play, in my opinion. But I do think that it's easier today than it was when I started in 2006 to get involved at any of the levels, because social media will always ask for your assistance. And the more active you get in the social platform, the more likely you'll come to an in-person platform. The next thing you know, you basically set up shop inside your party's office. It's just the way that it works.
Yeah, and I agree with Andrea. It's very easy to get connected to the party. I started when I was in grad school and did a unpaid free internship. I would call it an internship, but it was really just free service to the party because I did need an internship. So I said, oh, well, I'll go work for the party. I may want to run one day. But when you go to the party, they will ask you, like, what do you want to do? Like, are you want to be grassroots? Do you want to run for office one day? So I told them I want to run for office one day. So they put me with the guy who was over state and Senate races. So they're like, okay, you're going to be his intern so you can see how it works behind the scenes. It gives you a great eyes view behind the scenes of how campaigns are ran, how volunteers are handled, how they speak to candidates, what you are expected to raise. And I say, if you are a candidate, the party is mainly there for technical support. They are not there to fund you, not unless you get to a certain level. And it depends on whether you're running at the local level, state or federal. They have their amounts that you have to raise by yourself before they will even get involved. So I hear a lot of candidates say, well, I thought the party was going to support me. They're really not supporting me. I'm like, okay, well, are they picking up the phone and talking to you and just giving you some advice? Well, that's their support. And not until you raise a certain amount of money, if they're even considering giving you a dime. When I ran for Senate against a Republican incumbent, the party literally gave me $1,000. And that was after really like banging on the doors, talking to all these people, raising money, and they're like, okay, well, like, it's like your daddy's wallet. They're like, here you go, just take this and do what you can do with it. You know, take this $1,000 and run with it and do what you can do, and we'll just track your numbers. Now, what they will help you with is giving you voter data. You will get access to this data where you will know what doors to knock on, who's a Democrat, who's a Republican, when was the last time they voted. You will get access to that data so you can go out there and do work. At the Democrat Party, the local level, we're always trying to get people to become precinct committee chairs or vice chairs. The precinct committee chairs are those individuals that actually go out and get people registered to vote, tell them about the elections, get them all geared up, making sure they have all their documents together. These are the people that also vote on any vacancies within the party or the slating process or the convention. So these are very important people because if a seat becomes open and we need to put someone in that seat, then you get the vote on that person. So are there PC slots open? We have tons of PC slots open. We have tons of vice chair slots open. So we are looking for people at all times to get in these slots. They do have training. So we have like a one-day training that will teach you how to be a PC, what you're exactly supposed to do. Now, do you get paid for this? As Adrianne said, not really. Not really. To be a PC, you get a little over $100, like on election day. But usually as a good PC, you're supposed to give that back. You sign a note to give that back to the party. So that's why when she said funding may or may not be there, it's kind of there. And if you are given to it, then you're expected to give it back, to donate it back to the party. So that's my take on getting involved in the party. I can go on and on about the party.
It's not lucrative, but it could be down the road. Never.
Yes.
Well, from my standpoint, you know, I mentioned relationships earlier, and you know, being a participant, you individually want to have fun, and I think that that's one of the things that the parties organizations, the county or the state, city organizations can do. I mean, they have monthly meetups, you know, it's usually at a bar or a restaurant, and you're meeting up with new friends, and you should enjoy building those relationships. And then soon that will blossom into being able to make a phone call, or then, you know, volunteering specifically as a candidate help, or, you know, running for precinct committeeman, you know. But the first out of the gate, you know, the first bite, you know, is just showing up and participating in anything fun that they're doing. Ice cream socials, you know.
I would also say a bit to Adrian's, well, I guess everybody's kind of brought up clubs or township clubs, social clubs. The additional advice that I would impart is to think about the issues that really matter to you. Think about causes or policies that you feel really passionately about, because there's likely an organization that will be there for you to be a part of an affinity group or to be a good ally, and to help with maybe a particular policy you'd like to see advocated for or changed. On the Democratic side, we have Stonewall Democrats, the LGBTQIA group. We have the Latino Democratic Caucus, with the Black Caucus, and IDAC. We have, you know, all of the different township clubs where if, you know, you're really focused in on those local issues and making sure that your neighbors have adequate sidewalks, adequate lighting, things of that nature. Those township clubs are where your counselors are going to be likely every month. So I would also just encourage you all to really think about the issues that motivate you, because that will keep you going back as well. The people, the friendships, the camaraderie, that access, and the work that you fall into that you may or may not be paid to do will be there. But think about what really lights that fire in you to keep showing up and to keep pushing forward, and why you want to be a part of the process.
And Elise, I'm gonna have you maybe go a little bit, but shifting a little bit in direction. I want to take a step back and talk about, again, some of the structural barriers that we see and what we can do about them, right? There are ways forward, and specifically for certain communities, those barriers are higher than others, and that shows up in engagement rates and voter turnout rates, and just the difficulty of the process of voting or not. Seniors in the pandemic, you know, just for all the health-related reasons, right? What Indiana did or didn't do around mail-in voting or absentee voting, those who are disabled in communities of color, and just what the different kinds of structural barriers are that you see, especially through your work with HOPE, even just on the voter registration front. And where have, you know, what are the political parties doing on it, but also more broadly, like our nonprofit and civic organizations like HOPE or other organizations, how have things improved? What are the things that we can still do that are kind of realistic for our time and place? And how can we really start removing some of the structural barriers, especially for communities that are hit hardest?
Sure. I think one example comes to mind as someone who advocates often for Hispanic and Latinx communities. I've been in positions where the fact that we have appointed precinct committee people by, you know, each party can appoint PCs. You know, I've been in positions where that is a barrier within my own party for my community. And that's been troublesome, but at the same time, you know, in instances where we weren't able to push through those barriers, I think a lot of people in the community saw them firsthand who may not have. So even though there are the barriers exist, I think it's still very important for people to run for positions, to run in those contested races where someone may resign or leave, and then it's an appointed, you get elected through precinct committee people races. Those are hard, but it's still so important for especially people and women of color to keep pushing, because even if you may not win, the success you do find from that process is that you pulled your community up around you and you've sharpened your arsenal of skills for the next battle. So, you know, everything down to just those PC battles, I've been on the winning and losing side of those before, and those can be a barrier for especially Latinas in Marion County, and have been. I would say that I don't think there is a system right now created in our government structures or in institutions that doesn't have barriers. Like I said before, a lot of these were created without any of us in mind. And we're still pushing through that. But it is so important to show up. It's so important to bring your people with you. And it's so important to offer accountability, even if it means talking to people in your own party. When you see something, saying something to them and holding them accountable. And I'm not saying publicly always. I'm saying if you have access to someone and you can say, hey, I'm noticing a trend, or I'm noticing some habits, or I don't see enough people at the table, you have access to that, to the party. And I think it's important to offer that feedback often. And I think it makes us all better. So those are some of the barriers I've experienced, but I am a white-facing Hispanic woman. So for me, I have a lot of privilege that I inherit with that. So,
Well, I think that goes to the importance of a lot of the leadership training programs that we talked about, and those of us who can get a seat at the table. What are we doing with that? Who are we trying to bring with us? What are we trying to advance? How are we trying to open doors for others who are going to come behind us or around us? I would love to hear others' thoughts as well on, again, some of the structural barriers unique to certain communities in our state, and what we're doing about that, what we should be doing about that, and we aren't.
I would just chime in. I would say from the party's perspective, I don't see an investment in our community educating them on civic engagement, on the process. There's no outreach material. There's no awareness on what is a PC. How do you become a PC? There's no constant education being put in place where we're constantly educating and outreaching and teaching people what are those issues. And then how do you face those issues and how do you make changes? So until we start educating and building out outreach at every level, and where people should not have to come to the party. They shouldn't have to come to a website and try to get educated over it on, or come and try to mentor a legislator, because most people are scared to death to talk to a legislator and come up and say, can I shadow you? Can I mentor you? But that information should already be publicly out there. We should already be putting out that information where people can easily obtain. And then that will help build their strength and their courage once they're educated on these items. A lot of people don't even know they can come to the state house anytime and testify. All they have to do is just sign their name. So trying to teach them how you come and advocate, that you can come, but then you have to track the hearings. You got to know what the hearings are. You got to track your bill. If you are interested in a bill, you got to know how to know when it's being heard, and then maybe take time off work to come up there or send in a letter. So all that advocacy takes education before people can even get started. Because the last thing you want to do is show up at the city county building or show up at the state house and just be like, hey, I'm here. Like, I want to get involved. And it's just people moving like this. And so it's hard to get someone to even stop and talk to you, because everybody's already on their own pace and trying to talk to people. But I think that's where we got to start at. And what I'm seeing is that lack of investment in outreach and education.
I would say the same thing. I think that one of the things that I learned in my time as president of the exchange of the Indianapolis Urban League is how few people actually know the jobs that are on the ballot, what those roles are supposed to do for you, the taxpayer, how you can engage with each of those people, how you could become one of those people, and why it's so important that you actually participate every single time they're asking you to be rehired. And really making it that plain. It is that level that seems to be missing. And so I think one of the biggest tangible takeaways is if you are aware of those things, make sure that everyone in your sphere is also aware of those things. Because no one is investing in teaching the public what those jobs are, what they do, and how they matter to you. Quite frankly, it's not helpful for folks who are trying to pull, not so progressive ideas passed on women and others. It's not helpful for them if you know what they're doing. I don't know any better way to put that. And so when we're looking at young people, when we are looking at even just looking inside my own community, working with the African American Coalition over the years to make sure that every one of our member organizations had access to that basic information and felt comfortable engaging with candidates for office is even a struggle. There are people who are not only terrified to engage, but also think that it means that they like one party over another just because they ask questions. And that's actually the true engagement strategy. You've got to ask questions. You need to know where candidates stand on your issues. It's okay to disagree. It's okay that you don't align on every issue. But if you haven't had the conversation, you're blindly following in one direction, and that's also not helpful.
So just to pick up on that, I think as all three of you were talking, I was making notes, and there's 35 people, listening theoretically online or here. Really appreciate those of you that came out tonight. And the reality is that the onus is on you. It's on me and it's on you. You have a voice. We can't be relying on an organization to push out information. We have the exact same social media outlet platforms that organizations do. And you have a sphere of influence that is greater in influence than any one of our organizations that we've mentioned tonight, because it's personal. On election day, every single year on my Facebook, I write, these are the candidates I'm voting for, and this is why. And that's just informing my friends, who I believe in and who I've researched. And, that's something so easy that you can do. We all have neighbors. We all have, it's springtime, and we talk politics in my neighborhood, and it's fair game. That's not something that we shy away from. And honestly, it keeps us away from being complacent, because complacency and being isolated and only working within your family, household bubble, your work bubble, it just continues to isolate your opportunity to be an influencer. And I'm no better than anybody else. I haven't posted on Facebook in ages, but as the political season certainly heats up, for us to just simply put out, here's the hope page on our Facebook page, and have you done this? And those little bits go a long way because they're personal.
So we're going to open it up to Q&A in just a couple of minutes. But I guess my last question as moderator to the group is, as we look to the fall, it is an election year, not a federal election year, but or at least midterms with some federal elections, but not presidential. We sit in March, almost April. What are the things that we in our audience can think about doing to prepare to be not just a good voter this fall, but bring others along with us, right? Use these next few months to engage with others, to advocate for others. What are the things that you think people should think about these next few months as we approach the fall? What can they expect in terms of milestones and primaries, and when things start getting hot and heavy, and how they can become involved in the interim? I'll also say though, as we start to look towards the fall, I'll make a plug for the Women for Change conference that's coming up in the fall. I don't know if you have a date.
October 6th.
October 6th, there you go. And then you'll still have about a month to do all the election madness. It's titled Empowering Indiana, the State of Civic Education. So obviously right on point, and right in time for the election. What are individual actions and individual ways of getting involved now in these sort of next, what are we, 6 months, something like that?
I always harass people and tell them to make a plan. So make a plan for the primary, make a plan for the general, and make sure that you share your plan with others so that they have a plan.
And what would a plan look like?
So my plan is, I actually did this today, thanks Elise. I checked my voter registration. After checking my voter registration, verifying what the election days are or what days the polls could be open, and really starting to block out my calendar. Sounds really basic, but the worst thing in the world is planning to travel but not making a plan to vote, and a lot of people do that. So making the plan also includes who's on my actual ballot, checking my ballot, who's going to be there, what are the things that they care about. Let me go find their candidate pages. Let me see if they're going to be at a forum. If I need to go, maybe I'm going to bring some other people with me to their forums. If there's a lot of people on a primary in my neighborhood, normally there's not, but if there are, I want to engage with everyone that's going to possibly be on my primary ballot. So the plan is not only for the general, which I think most people tend to coach you to make a plan for the general. This year we have a lot of people being primary. And so you really want to check that in your area because there could be a candidate that maybe really aligns better with you than the candidates you've always voted for. And it's okay if that happens. That's part of our democracy. So be sure that you've actually done the research so that you don't get caught off guard when someone tries to hand you literature on the way in. And then all of a sudden you don't have a plan because you're trying to change your mind at the last minute.
So I would add on to the plan. So that's all about you and making sure you're ready. Now I would say volunteer on a campaign. This year is a record number year of how many women we actually have running in the primary. For the Democrats, we have almost 20 women running, and out of those numbers, 11 are African American. So some of these women have never ran before. Some of them are brand new. Some of them are graduates of Hoosier Women Forward. So find one of these candidates that you believe in, that you see fits what your ideals are, because they all need volunteers. They all need people to door knock. They all need people to call, make phone calls, send emails. $1 or $2, anything will help to get a button, a t-shirt. So $1 goes a long way on these campaigns. But when you talk about supporting women, and now that we have these candidates actually running, go out and support one of these candidates. That's what we really need. Go out and learn about them and actually work on one of their campaigns, and we would greatly appreciate it.
For me, it's, don't be afraid to talk about civic engagement, inside your circles, because again, that personal touch is just like the door knocking, that's creating that personal touch, and that just spurs action by someone else. And I think that as we become more aware of the lack of women at the leadership platform, we have to be more active, individually. And so whether it's participating with a candidate, making a plan, all of those are individual decisions that you actually have to act on. We can't be thinking about it, and we can't be just talking about it. We have to take action. Excuse me, I'm getting over bronchitis, and so we have to be talking and making the plan, and sometimes it's easier to do that when you have a group of friends to do it with.
I would also say get curious about some of the offices that you don't know about. I think we hear a lot about some of the larger offices, and we have great representation, especially here tonight with Representative Shackleford. And there are other offices on the ballot, clerk, reporter, your trustee. If you really have a heart for people in your neighborhood who are facing houselessness or and experiencing homelessness or don't have access to basic needs, what do you know about the trustee's office and how they may be able to help your neighbor who you come across and you talk to them and they might need a little help to get by? Get curious about the different leadership opportunities in the elected positions and the elected officials that are doing things on a daily basis that affect you and your neighborhood. They affect you may not think of them every day, but they really do affect your life. They affect whether or not, you know, how the homes around you are assessed and how that impacts gentrification in your area. They, you know, affect your ability to get a specific type of license or, you know, apply for a marriage license. That's the clerk's office. Things of that nature are little things that I think we forget when we get caught up in some of the larger debates. But elected office really has an impact in how we show up every day. So be curious. Definitely look up your ballot, look up and down and see who's on there. And I would say definitely volunteer. And then if you have the ability to donate to a candidate, and you may not have the time to volunteer, donating is also a great way to show up for people who you would like to support for office. And women candidates definitely need that help. In the leadership series sessions that I teach, the thing that I always emphasize is making the ask, because it's really hard, I think, for women to make that ask. We can talk about why we're passionate, we can talk about the things that we've done. Hopefully we're bragging enough about all the things we do, and then making that ask at the end is really difficult. So make it easier on some women candidates and just say, hey, I'm gonna donate to your campaign before you can get to that ask. It'll make that conversation a lot easier for them.
We're asking now for them.
Give them anything to ask. Just do it.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up just a little bit. You know, we're being lighthearted and talking about small individual changes that can be done by all of us. But the reality is that the more women we have in office, it impacts us as a population. Like, I was at the Women for Change fundraiser, was it last month? And Lieutenant Governor Ellspermann was the speaker, and they were, the Women for Change were talking about all of the successes, the bill changes that they had done over the last year. And then Lieutenant Governor told the story of how when she was in office, she learned that women in prison weren't being given free access to tampons. They were having to pay for tampons, which is just mind-blowing in today's world. You know, that was just a couple years ago. That for me really hit home on, all right, like, I get that this is a good idea, and I get like that's where I should be as a woman. But we have a family of women that we need to work together for, because, you know, we are leaders in our own right, and if we're not taking these individual actions, then we can't help those, you know, that are gentrified or that are homeless, that are undereducated. We just can't make impacts for them as well. So you own a little bit of responsibility in that.
Yeah, that's a great point. So for each of us to internalize in our own way. Well, I'd love to shift to a period for question and answer. You've heard a lot, but there is literally almost like a bottomless well of wisdom sitting at the table here. So please ask away. In our live audience, anyone who wants to raise their hand and ask, and if there are any questions online, we can help address those as well. So.
I'd like to start with one question about this. There's so many people exhausted and disengaged. How do you start the conversation about what particular strategies you will use?
For this, I'm sorry, for the, in case you can hear that online, the question is how everyone starts conversations around voting in their communities and coming out of a period when folks feel exhausted, maybe disillusioned. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but, you know, it doesn't really matter. Can I do it? Do I have the energy to do it? So how do you start the conversation around voting?
If someone is complaining about something that involves an elected official, that's normally my in.
Okay.
That person was elected, therefore you may or may not have elected them, but you have something to do with if they get reelected.
Yeah, and I usually start, people need to know how the dots are connected. So what does their vote actually mean? What issue are they interested in? I remember I was talking to a young guy and one of the judges just happened to come up. So I'm talking to him and he starts telling me about his record, about his felony record. So then when the judge comes up, I'm like, oh, this is Judge such and such. He's actually an elected judge. And he began to talk to him. So I said, now you see, if you vote, this is the kind of person you can vote for. This is the kind of judge that you need in your corner because you're trying to get your record expunged, but you don't know how, you don't know the first step. So if they know how it personally affects them, how the expungement laws personally affect them, we give them the information about expungement and how it works compared to other states, then they're more inclined to vote once you connect with them, whether it's their kids in school, whether it's the highways, whatever complaints they got about any type of system that an elected official is over or that the government is over. Just making them understand how the government is connected to their everyday lives and how it's connected to their vote.
I would say I have a similar cue where I feel like I have an in, and that's when I hear people talk about equity issues. I think those conversations are happening more and more, thank goodness. But you know, if I'm in a DEI training or if I'm at an anti-racism workshop and there are folks there that, you know, get really passionate and have new knowledge and unlearning and want to take it somewhere, I ask them if they're registered to vote. Because I can tell you 2 policies right off the bat that would help my community. We need, our undocumented community needs access to driver's licenses and we need access to in-state tuition. And so when people talk to, when equity comes up, that's also a place where I like to ask people if they're registered to vote and have a plan to vote, because that's a huge part of that conversation. Voting is community care. And the way we can show up and help write systems that are not equitable is by registering to vote, showing up, researching the issues and electing people in who will make those systems more correct and equitable for everyone.
And my end is typically at the federal level. Everybody likes to talk about federal politics and I don't. But that's usually my end to say my fearless opinion on what's happening at the local level, you know, in our state or whatnot. But you have to be fearless in sharing your opinion, and then you have to be empathetic in understanding, you know, their opinion as well. And so those both ways.
We have a couple of great questions from our online audience. I'll read this verbatim and let everyone respond. From my experience, we do better in Indiana with bipartisan support. How can we work on that in Indiana when it comes to the voting process and voter engagement? So continuing the same vein, but really focusing on maybe bipartisan policy solutions or strategies or nonpartisan strategies.
I think one where we really miss the boat is any type of nonpartisan or bipartisan redistricting commission. We've really missed the boat on that.
Other states are
And
doing it, right? It's
other
not
states are
a
doing
uniform
it.
idea.
When I was at the State House working on staff for the Senate for redistricting, you know, after 2010, a lot of folks came in from, you know, nonpartisan, bipartisan parts of the state, and they went into Iowa, who had a pretty good system, nonpartisan system at that time that had been implemented. We have examples of why it works. And now, again, we have gone through an entire 10 years of kicking that can down the road, where we have seen even more gerrymandering. And that really makes our job when it comes to fighting voter apathy a lot harder. It's still, you know, being active participants in voting is still so worthy, and there has to be everybody's voices should be at the table. It's just really hard when every 10 years legislators bring up these bills and it's talked about and it's a, well, maybe, or maybe we can do this or that. And I feel like the issue from the, Republican supermajority was danced around for so long, then the clock ran out and here we are again. So we do miss the boat on some solutions. That is one, and maybe in the next 10 years, we'll figure it out.
Do you think it'll take litigation? Other states, other Republican-led states are doing it, other Democrat-led states are doing it. So what do you think the barrier is here?
That's where we're at now. That's where we're taking, and I will let Representative Shackleford, she's been in the
Yes,
trenches on this, so I'll defer, that question to you.
So we were talking House Bill 1006 law enforcement. I would say, okay, we can work together. Everybody agrees pretty much on law enforcement. On elections, there is a philosophical difference between the Democrats and Republicans. The Republicans want election day one day. They think it should just be one day. They don't like having multiple days. They don't like having early voting. They don't like really absentee voting. And in their minds, they think that opens up to fraud. So for them, their whole thing is, how do we secure this election? How do we clamp down and make sure that it's secure as possible and that people are not opening up to fraud, being able to come in at different times of the day, the early voting, the absentee voting. So their whole strategy is, let's compile and add on for absentee voting. Now you gotta add on the last four digits of your social number. You gotta add on your driver's license. So they'll keep adding on these layers. And on the Democrat side, we want open access. We want even more days. We want even more vote centers. We want people to be able to vote no matter where they are. If a busy mom needs to vote while she's dropping off her kid to daycare, then she should be able to stop at a mall or kiosk or somewhere to vote. We want voting to be so accessible. So we're on opposite ends philosophically. So it makes it hard to have a bipartisan effort when it comes to elections when we're constantly like this.
I would kind of lend that, and a child shall lead them. I would kind of lean back into that. As we look at our younger generations, they have less interest in one side or the other in polarization. Back in 2015, there were several of us young people that attempted to run for city council. I think only one of us made it, right? Yep, Link made it. But we agreed on all state rep. Yeah, he's not a state rep. But we all agreed on the majority of the things that we were running for. And I think that you're going to see more and more of that as we get younger and younger candidates. And so what I think is it's a long game. I don't think that it's a strategy that we can get to immediately, but I do think that it comes out to how are we going to inspire and continue to keep motivated younger candidates that don't like the polarization. Because while we still have people that like the polarization and like holding on to their ideology or their philosophy towards how we get there, we'll stay this far apart.
Okay, well, let's go to a second question that we received from our online audience. And we've touched on a few of the answers here, but I think they bear repeating and expanding upon. What support roles would you recommend for people who may have limited time due to work, family, or other commitments? And here I'm presuming maybe support roles for a campaign or just general engagement activities. We've heard about donating, certainly is a great option if you have limited time, and, but not great if you have very limited resources. So let's go through a few more specifics as actionable strategies for how people can play a role when there are lots of other constraints that they have in life.
So I would say the first thing is find an organization that you can line up with that's doing advocacy work, because they are already tracking all the bills that you're interested in. They will put out those alerts, and then all you have to do is just respond. All you have to do is send an email or make a phone call, but they're doing all the work that you don't have to do. So whether if it's Moms in Action, whether if it's PACE, if you're interested in ex-offenders, whether if it's Rise Indy, you're interested in education, find one of those groups, the NAACP, the Urban League, who's already doing that work. And then you just have to simply read their emails and assist where they need you to assist. That's the easiest way, because then you don't have to do a lot of work that needs to be done. And I would say for every issue that's out there, I don't care if it's environmental to education, there's a group that's advocating for it. All right, advocating against it. So there's so many groups at the state house and on the local level that's advocating, and they can do that. I don't care if it's AARP, everybody, I can list all these healthcare organizations. If you're interested in any kind of healthcare, the Minority Health Coalition, AARP, and they're always looking for volunteers and looking for people to help push those emails and make those calls.
I would say if you like the more grassrootsy, I can touch it, I can see it, I can feel it. Stuffing mail or making phone calls, you can do those from home. Serve as a yard sign farm for a candidate. So I couldn't get my signs everywhere, but I had several people who said, just drop off 30 and I'll put them in my front yard and let people come pick them up for my neighborhood. Those are really, really helpful things that you can do. They don't take much energy or effort from you, but they help candidates out tremendously.
Great examples. Do we have other questions from the audience?
So it's a bit obviously for women and not giving them a platform.
The question is, how can we not speak for women, but give them a platform to speak for themselves? So definitely have them run for office. But they can also come and testify. So if they feel strongly about any piece of legislation that's running through the Senate or running through the House, they can come down and speak for themselves. We have a lot of women that come in and testify. Most of the people that come into the health committee are moms, and they're testifying on how their child has been affected by some type of disease or not being able to get payments. Or if we have a doctor come in, it's usually a female doctor. Because the women aren't scared to voice their opinion, as long as they know the path and how they need to sign up and where they need to go, they'll take off work and come down and voice their own concern. All we have to do is show them and educate them and lead them, and then they're there. So I would say just give them the information. Yeah, you don't want to speak on behalf of them when they can speak on behalf of themselves.
I would say, oh, go ahead.
I would just say that also be prepared to take a seat. If you're not a woman and you're trying to make space for a woman and give a space for a woman to talk for herself. If you're a man, oftentimes that means you're going to have to be the one that makes that space. If you have an opportunity and a woman could do just as good or better, make sure you're the person who is stepping aside and giving that person an opportunity. And I'm just kind of speaking from experience when I hear, because I hear a lot of people say like, how can we help? How can we help? And then it gets to the time where there's an elected position or a primary, and you know, the person who wanted to help a community doesn't step aside to make space for that community or that person. It feels like maybe there were limits to how much you wanted to help. So I'd say if you want to help women speak for themselves, make that space, and sometimes that might mean you have to take a seat.
And give them the encouragement.
Yeah,
I feel like, you know, sit down and play Adele, Rise Up, you know, and just be that cheerleader, because women often are the cheerleaders, you know, and we need to be encouraged, because for women to step up and take a leadership role, we really are going against the grain. And it takes a lot of courage, and we're all thinkers, and you know, we tend to overthink, so we just need to do it.
Yeah, and I'd say, and I was right along there with Elise. I think tangibly, one of the best things, if you as a man are sitting in a space and a women's issue comes up and is being discussed, and women have not been allowed to speak, it's a great time to say, there are many women here today, we have not heard from them. I'd like to ask that we men step back and give the floor to the women, because we don't understand their issue the way that they do. And so I think that is a really hard space, because a lot of times you look in a room and you see, well, they're being quiet, they're not saying anything, maybe they don't have anything to say. It's not that they don't have anything to say, it's that often we don't believe that you will listen should we start.
Sometimes it's just exhausting to have to be the one to say, okay, I'm going to push back on that, you know, or to break into a conversation if you've been talked over, so.
And that same thing goes in exchange for any other underrepresented community that you could be talking about. You know, there's quite a few times people talk about Black people. I'm sitting right there. I have not been able to get a word in edgewise. And my biggest goal would be able to say, okay, well, you haven't even asked me for my opinion, but in the whole time you've been talking, I've been in a group chat asking other people's opinions, and let me read some responses. And I think that it's really important that we allow people to engage on their own behalf. And so one of the greatest tangible things you can do is open the door.
We have time for one more question. Senior.
Yeah, so I feel like social media is a really accessible tool, especially for civic engagement, but I don't really see a lot of social media use on like the local level or even the state level. So how would you suggest getting people to be civically engaged through social media on the smaller scale level?
So I would say on the state level, we use social media a lot. And I will say the young people on our staff, our communications team have just gotten into TikTok. So now they're trying to TikTok everything. But
It's got a lot of.
So I watched their TikTok, so we encourage them to do the different videos. I think we did a dance, a Black Caucus dance, but now they're gonna start putting their policy stuff on there. For Facebook and Twitter, either you can handle your own or your staff does it. I handle my own because I use it for personal and for political. So if you're gonna do political and personal and have one account, then the individual will have to do it. For the legislators, they have the staff do it. They usually post at least twice a week on something that's going on that the legislator or senator is doing. And we have one for the Black Caucus. All the caucuses have one, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, then the TikToks that's coming out is doing more. But social media is a big component of our communications. We count those numbers too. We count every view, every hit. What can we critique? What can we change when it comes to communications? What I've noticed lately, if I started to get a lot of young people following me on LinkedIn, which I'm kind of surprised, but they're usually in politics somehow. So it's usually like the president of the Democrat Club or the president of one of their school groups. So, and I accept all students. I don't accept everybody on LinkedIn because I only accept people that I know or need to know professionally. Facebook, I accept everybody, so that's why I have 5,000 friends. But for LinkedIn, it's limited. But if a student or a young person sent me a request, I accept them and engage with them.
I would say when it comes to social media, not everyone's friendship circle is as open as Corrie's friendship circle. So know your audience. And if you know that you've got a lot of people who are disengaged, start by steering issues from a general basic level at a foundational tone and allow people to have conversation and discourse, but don't take a side. And as you participate in that conversation, almost serve as the moderator and drop in different nuggets or different links so that people can educate themselves. I think a lot of times one of the greatest things that we can do is be the gateway to engagement. And sometimes that means knowing enough about your audience that you don't want to stir the pot and start a fight with your post, but you do want people to be somewhat informed.
I also think digital organizing can be really effective when you are on a certain platform. And, you know, I have a couple groups where it's like, you know, on Twitter, there's a DM group chat that if I see something, I'm sending it to them being like, oh, did you see this? But those groups can be really effective digital organizing groups to send things back out. So when I'm doing something and I would like it to be amplified, or I have a cause, or I'm really hoping that, you know, the governor's going to veto a bill and I've got a tweet about it, I send it to that group of folks that I'm regularly engaging with, and then all of a sudden I have, you know, 20 people retweeting what I have. So, you know, just because social media is free and accessible doesn't mean that it's easy to use and that you don't have to strategize the way you do it. You have to be really intentional. I mean, if you're using it as a platform, you have to be very intentional and really authentic, and always be looking for strategies for how to organize the people in your social, where your social platforms are.
And with that, we've unfortunately hit time for our remaining discussion. Can we please have a round of applause? As well of wisdom. So I want to thank everybody for sharing part of their evening with us tonight. I want to thank the Planning Committee for Women for Change, Jan Clark, Rita Venable, Alcira Villarreal, Noelle Snyder, Noah Johnson, Haley. Thank you for everything. Yeah, you did. And for taking us through this first hybrid program. You know, this may be the new normal, who knows? And we just want to leave you with a couple of additional action items. I think throughout the night, we wanted to cover along those action strategies. So I want to say that you're invited to the Women for Change celebration of HB 1079, the elements of rape bill at the State House. And that's happening on Wednesday, April 6th, from 11:30 to 1 at the State House. And the next panel discussion like this, that LCP Listen, Connect, and Participate, will be on the hot topic of women's health. So stay tuned for that date. It's still being planned and organized. And lastly, Women for Change, it doesn't grow money on trees. We all want to grow money on trees, and it doesn't. We haven't figured that out yet. So thank you for all of your support tonight through your ticket contributions, and you've helped us get within about $300 of our goal for the evening. So please consider making a contribution. You can do that online through the Women for Change website, womenforchangeindiana.org/donate. So thank you very much. The one phrase I will leave us all with came from Elise, and I think it's a beautiful way to think about these next few months as we head into the fall, is that voting is community care. I love that. So as Representative Shackleford said, figure this out for yourself and how it affects you and your daily life, and you're going to vote for that reason. Also vote for those whom you love and care about in your families and communities. So thank you and good night.
Thank you.